Eternal Undying Love, written by Brett Keane, and narrated terribly by Misto Christo, with my crap voice and crap microphone. Chapter 1, Strangers of Night and Day. The End. In a small town called Quiet Meadows, teenagers crowded the sidewalks in front of the high school. Freshmen who were new to the school searched for others like them so they wouldn't have to stand there alone. The preps had their cliques, and the burnout metalheads with their hard ways stood back against the wall, trying to act cool, but just as anxious to meet someone they could connect with as well. The pressures of high school had already begun before the first bell had even rung. A group of jocks circled like vultures around a short young man, mocking the way he walked and talked. It just made matters worse when he stuttered,
Leave me alone.
Tim always stuttered when he was nervous. They taunted him and slapped him in the back of the head, causing him to drop his books and school supplies. A short distance away stood Tim's old friend Mike, who used to be like him, but vowed to change when the time had come for high school. However, Mike was still weak, not as strong as some others were, but smart enough not to interfere when trouble arose. He just stood back, sipping down a cream soda. Rap music was blaring away from the school parking lot. The blacks blared the bass for all of the state of Missouri to hear, even those it did not appeal to. A group of skinheads who were closer to the school mumbled and cursed, directing it towards the blacks. 2 rows down in the parking lot, a sophomore by the name of Steve Manning scrunched down in his seat, shooting up steroids, for he knew he needed power and strength if he ever planned to play high school football. He got his cheerleader girlfriend hooked on smack and speed. Then there were the blood-bought Christians, saints of God. Christians who watched from the sidelines, judging everything around them that they didn't agree with the way their parents had blindly taught them. Now they watched with no intention of helping, as the unpopular young man, Tim, was still being terrorized by the jocks. They just turned their backs on him and giggled to themselves about what they did after church service last Wednesday. They tried to make themselves righteous when when a freshman girl who practiced Wicca walked by and chuckled sarcastically,
Love thy neighbor, ha! Doesn't Tim live right next to you, Susan?
Go to hell, Satan, bitch!
one intelligent Christian said, showing her true colors.
I told you 1,000 times that Wicca does not deal with Satanism or God.
She was interrupted by Susan, the Christian.
Yeah, we know you're a nature person. Now go to hell.
The Wiccan girl was pissed, but she didn't get violent. She just turned her head and held her hand directly up to Susan's face, then proceeded to give her the bird.
We would just get suspended, in trouble by our family, and well, it's just not God's will.
Susan slapped her hand away. Jenny smiled, and as she walked towards the fight, she looked back and chuckled.
Was it God's will to make out behind the music building with the captain of the football team?
Susan's face turned flush, and she denied it ever happened, but it did. Many times. The high school was a carnival of chaos. The majority of the parents were aware of this, and others could care less, for they themselves were either alcoholics, drug addicts, or perhaps middle or lower class individuals who worked 18-hour shifts, never having time to interact with their children's lives and everyday behavior. Half of them never even made it through their junior year in high school when they were teens. In this old country town, if you lived there for long enough, you could tell right away who was who. For instance, the women who are 30 to 40 years old, working in nursing homes, they wipe old folks' asses and clean bedpans and change the sheets every 4 hours, making $5 to $8 an hour. They smoked cigarettes as if they were going out of style and talked about the past when they used to be attractive and thin. Or how they could have been an administrative RN had they not wasted their lives on the men they married and had their children with. This is what came of those girls in high school who were snobby-ass cheerleaders or supposed Christian girls. Then there were the teenagers who were raised by their mothers, who spent their lives on welfare and HUD, trying to collect child support from a burnout boyfriend or husband who has kids with other women. Most never get the child support from child enforcement, so they collect AFDC from the government because most of the men work on farms or in small hole-in-the-ground bars. These bars were where they drank away their checks, and 90% of them are used car salesmen who sell lemons, and the other half are mechanics who can never seem to fix your goddamn car. And last but not least, you've got your veterans of war, disabled, and Social Security collecting idiots who don't get enough to afford toilet paper, let alone take care of a bunch of kids who are lucky to get a warm bath once a week. To get these parents to interact positively with their children, it would be a luxury they don't have. You could always tell the Christians from the atheists. Christians, who went to church if their used car worked that day, were mostly uneducated rednecks, which only had prayer and hopes. Then you had the atheists, who were teachers in colleges and were made up of many who would become scientists who, in turn, would go on to a different kind of life, a normal life, that most others could never hope to achieve. They studied evolutionism and creationism, intending on not staying in this godforsaken town of quiet meadows. Sure, there were the educated Christians and Catholics, and so on, but they were the ones who held the money bowls and got the tax cuts, just for claiming that God exists. In addition, there were the atheists who claimed witchcraft, sorcery, or occults. Some nutbags even claimed to be blood-sucking vampires. Funny thing was, they shoved Snickers bars down their necks at home. You could see them during the day, and there were those who debated the existence extraterrestrial. Then there was the entertainment issue in town. There was none. A supercenter Walmart, a Dollar General, and a couple of pawn shops. You had a small bowling alley where the old and decrepit hung out. It was vacant on bingo night. The teens drove up and down Main Street all night and day and on the weekends, where they might have a chance of getting laid or getting a fix. The grand finale was a knock-'em-down, drag-out fight, and the nearest hospital was an hour away, so you had better not let your opponent get the best of you. As you can see, things were pretty much routine, and it seemed like there wasn't much of a possibility of change. The town should have been called Nursing Home Haven, but if you ever asked a teen or adult what they call this place, 90% would say hell. Then again, a few would look at you as if you were dumb or if they were confused by the question. The Christian had their hands tied, they'd claim, "Turn the other cheek," and "Take life with a grain of salt. Let God handle it. Let him deal with your problems. God will reap hot coals upon your enemies' heads and scatter their bones across the countryside." The cold-hearted facts were this. Even if a man or woman wanted to better their life, they would have to leave because the town was overpopulated with people and jobs were scarce. Many had take-home pays that wouldn't even get them home. They were miserable. Just fight or hide was your option as a teen in school, but tomorrow it starts all over again. Soon you'd get your ass kicked, so you'd better hide well. Survival of the fittest. This way of thinking that got many people dead. Unfortunately, this is how it had been for years. The parents claimed to have had the same problems as their children, but this was false. Life was hard, but it gets more complicated. I bet mommy or daddy has never had to walk through a metal detector in school, or have someone walk down the hallway, smiling with a shotgun in hand as they passed your classroom. They'd look directly into your eyes as they pass, and you'd wonder if you would survive, and you'd wonder if you would survive the day. New elements spawning from music, television, and the internet would cause everlasting damage. Before a child leaves high school, the child will have seen brutal acts of rape and over 40,000 murders from television alone, gradually causing everlasting damage. A third of the young women in school will experience abortion or full-term pregnancy. For some, the elements mentioned could be a great tool for learning and obtaining power and money, for knowledge is power. However, for the ignorant, it is an instrument of destruction. How we choose to use it is a result of life and death, evolving or devolving. But today, the residents of the small town of Quiet Meadows hide their secrets and demons deep within the dark closets of their minds, behind closed doors, as to hide these things from the world around them. They will encounter two lone strangers who will forever change the routine of every man, woman, and child's life in this small town. By now, more teenagers who wanted to fit in joined in with the jocks to mock and pick on Tim, who was trying desperately to retrieve his books and school supplies. Then came the sucker punches and laughter as one obnoxious teen lit Tim's books on fire with his lighter. They kicked and punched him repeatedly as the crowd stirred. It was then that a huge black Cadillac roared into the entrance of the school, skidding in sideways to a halt directly in front of the jocks and Tim, who were less than 20 feet away. First, a long moment of silence as everyone gave his or her full attention to the black vehicle that just sat there. Two jocks got the courage to take a few slow steps towards it. As they drew closer to get a better look at the driver, the back tires began spinning with a loud road meets blacktop sound, causing an enormous amount of gray smoke to float like a mist around the sleek black car. They immediately retreated to their old positions on the sidewalk. The rap music from the blacks still blared, although they themselves watched from afar attentively. Soon the smoke began to clear, and the Cadillac could be seen clearly. Jenny coughed, as did many others. Then the car exploded with a heavy metal tune, Broken by Pantera. It was so loud, in fact, it drowned out the rap music. Then, after another moment of silence,
I can't see the driver. He's got those damn sunproof windows,
a jock told his friend as he pointed towards the car.
Who's to say it's a man at all?
Tim said, adjusting his glasses.
Yeah, could be a chick,
Jenny replied, helping Tim off the ground. Tim squinted his eyes, looking hard at the car. He, for some reason, had a strange feeling, as if he were looking upon the devil himself, but that thought quickly left his mind. As Tim was brushing off the blood and dirt from the jock's assault, he watched as the driver's window came down slowly. Yet, still, they could not see into the car's interior, nor could they see the identity of the driver. The engine revved loudly 3 times, then stopped, and silence again, causing some to get nervous, and others overly anxious. As moments passed, others began sensing danger, that the driver may have a weapon of some sort, or that he could possibly be some crazed psycho looking to kill, or worse. Others evaluated the situation and decided it was probably just some Others evaluated the situation and decided it was probably just some teenager trying to show off his wheels and intimidation skills.
Hey, motherfucker, why don't you step out of your little pussy-ass car? 'Cause if you got a problem, I'm your problem solver.
A big jock named Biff bluffed, better known as Moose to his friends. Still nothing, until Jenny noticed something dripping from the bottom of the car door into a decent-sized puddle on the ground. It appeared to be blood. Mike became aware of it as well. Then everyone stared at the new finding in utter confusion and fear. All of the sudden, black smoke began seeping out. I'm so sorry. All of the sudden, black smoke began seeping out of the driver's side window, the one nearest to them, then little smoke rings.
The dude's got blood coming out of the car, and he's just sitting there, staring at us all, smoking a goddamn cigarette.
A metalhead named Jeff Evans whispered to his friend. Finally, a hand covered in a black leather glove slowly appeared out of the driver's side window, wielding a cigarette, a black cigarette. The cigarette was almost burnt down to the butt. There was now only silence being traded between the onlookers and the mysterious driver. The hand began to turn slowly, then an eerie voice scoffed.
My friends, just as the cigarette burns out slowly within my hand, as will all of your lives.
And with that, the cigarette was flicked. Within seconds, it landed directly on the breasts of a female that was wearing a shirt which exposed her breasts, who was standing on the sidewalk. She patted her soft skin violently to stop the burning, but only caused the small flaming flecks of tobacco to scatter about in her shirt. Finally, the cigarette fell out of her shirt, being more of a surprise than painful. By the time she looked up to curse the driver, the window went up and a new heavy metal song called No More Tears by Ozzy Osbourne began to play. The car then burned rubber and ripped its way into the parking lot, coming to a skid and abrupt stop, almost hitting the black teenager's car and them, for that matter. They were all huddled up listening to their rap music. Cause of this, they began cursing and yelling at the driver, knocking at his passenger side window. The jocks, which were angry and curious, headed towards the parking lot to confront the driver. The bell rang, but no one entered the school. They knew something interesting was in store for them to see. Moments later, the passenger window came slowly down. 3 black guys and a black girl stood peering into the car, but could see nothing but darkness and void as the jocks had seen before. The black girl, who was slightly overweight, began pounding on the car, trying to provoke the driver to come out of the car, but to no prevail. It was then that the black girl impatiently and arrogantly shoved half her body into the car to assault the unseen driver. Her behind was hanging out of the window, with her short skirt revealing her panties and a full view of her butt. The black guys just stared, chuckling at her attempts, but mostly staring at her butt. At that moment, a huge puff of smoke came flowing out of the car window, and the black guys saw it and became worried. She got a brief smell of the cigarette odor. It was then that 2 red eyes stared directly into hers. She gasped as a huge mouth smiled, riddled with razor-sharp teeth. Shocked and in terror, there was nothing she could do. She then felt a strong hand grasp her throat and force her to stare downward, where she witnessed a horrifying sight. It was worse than a nightmare. Within this car, she could see the caverns of hell, demons, blood, fire, and it was safe to assume that it was Lucifer himself she had picked a fight with. Inside this black Cadillac was the doorway to hell. Though time seemed to cease, and it seemed she'd been there for an eternity, only seconds had gone by for the black guys who watched, giggling, outside the car door, not realizing that their friend, who was hanging out of the window, was in danger. It wasn't until a hand in a black leather glove ripped suddenly out the window, just above the black girl's back, slamming down hard and firmly, grasping her ass, right down the middle, pulling her entire body violently into the car. They heard screaming, then silence. Just then, the car started with thunderous roar from the engine, reversed, and sped by the oncoming jocks, which had been making their way over to the parking lot. The Cadillac ripped out of the entrance of the school and back onto the main road. The car and driver were gone, as well as the black girl. All who had been outside were shocked and frightened. They all remained silent. But it was the group of black guys who were the most awestruck, for they had seen the driver's eyes, blood red, and the wicked smile of a sadistic monster. But something that was even more haunting was its words.
I will be back.
I forgot the voice. They knew no one would believe them. Who with a sound mind would listen? All onlookers stood by in awe and terror, waiting for the police to arrive on the scene. A moment had passed, and then all of the windows in the school exploded. Pieces of shattered glass covered the teenagers, grass, and sidewalks. The first day of school had just begun.